Lesson 2, Contour Lines, Texture, and Construction. Construction. So, constructional drawing. These first two lessons have mostly focused on techniques we can employ to make specific marks, to build solid forms, and to reinforce and better understand how those forms sit in space. As we come to the end of the basics, however, I want to introduce the technique that will be at the core of the next several lessons, along with a couple of exercises to get you started. To put it simply, constructional drawing is a process used when drawing an object that involves breaking down that object into its simplest components, usually simple forms, and then reconstructing those components on the page. With that simple, solid structure and scaffolding present on your page, we build over it, increasing its complexity in successive passes and eventually reproducing the object. The process is as follows. Observe your subject. Whether it's from life or photograph, don't focus on the detail. Instead, try and strip it away in your mind and identify the basic forms that exist. First, look for geometric forms, like boxes, cylinders, etc. Next, look for organic forms, sausages, ball-like masses, etc. These are still relatively simple. Last of all, look for flat forms. Think about the ribbon arrows from lesson 2, which are flat, but twist and turn in 3D space. Identify your subject's basic construction. Think about how all of these components in the previous step relate to each other in 3D space. Think about where they connect to one another, how they intersect, and generally how they come together to create the structure of your object. Rebuild this construction on the page. In the first two lessons in the box and cylinder challenge, we look at how to draw the basic building blocks and how to rotate them arbitrarily in 3D space. Using this knowledge, construct what you've identified in the previous step in your drawing. Remember that you're not drawing the object right now, you're drawing a construction. Ignore detail, ignore complexity, just focus on that simple construction. And we have a picture of all those steps. And then 4, in successive passes, build up the level of complexity. You have a basic construction down. This serves as a foundation for more forms and more complexity. Any additional forms you add to your drawing must be supported by what is already there. I like to think of it like a building. You don't immediately jump in and pile up your bricks till you reach the sky. You build a foundation, then the load-bearing supports, then you create scaffolding, and so on. Each one is a new pass where more information is added to the drawing. Make sure that before you move on to the next pass that what you have on the page feels solid and three-dimensional. Don't move forward with things that feel flat and flimsy. Observation versus construction. Often when I see students discussing different approaches to drawing, observational drawing and constructional drawing are presented as a sort of dichotomy, two techniques that are mutually exclusive. This isn't really true. Constructional drawing inherently incorporates observation, as we cannot know which simple forms to start with unless we observe our subject matter carefully. Observational drawing can be done without construction, but if you ask me, this is an approach that is fundamentally incorrect. We talked a lot about observational drawing in my art school, and yeah, it wasn't super in depth except for repeated mentions of don't outline, without quite explaining what it really was, but that's what this is for. Construction is all about understanding how an object exists in 3D space as a part of the drawing process. If you're doing this, even if not as explicitly as we do here, you are employing an element of construction. If, however, you are working only in 2 dimensions, for example, drawing from a photo reference, photographs are by nature 2-dimensional, and reproducing it in your drawing directly without considering the fact that the photo represents a 3-dimensional scene, then there is no component of construction, and in all likelihood your drawing will appear flat and unconvincing. Yes, you may eventually become an exceptional photocopier, but we have machines that do that already, and the applications for that skill set are fairly limited these days. I mostly see it in portraits that people do for other people, which is kind of weird because you could just take a photo and make it grayscale, but they like that, I guess. This is why if you've learned any observational drawing in the past, you may have heard discussion over whether or not it's okay to use photo references, or if only drawing from life with the actual object in front of you is valuable. In my experience, this is because it is considerably more difficult for a beginner to look at an actual three-dimensional object without some degree of understanding or consideration for how it sits in 3D space. You're effectively forced to somehow process that 3D object into your 2D drawing. I have generally found that when employing constructional techniques like those taught here, it doesn't matter as much whether you draw them from life or not. There are still benefits to drawing an object from life, and if you have the means or opportunity, you absolutely should do so. But these techniques do help significantly reduce the pitfalls that come from working with 2D references. A technique for learning. I do want to make one thing very clear. While constructional drawing is an extremely effective technique for drawing, we are using it primarily as a learning tool. I want to address this because a lot of students see the drawing results from your lessons and the first thing that pops into their mind is, well, that's got too many lines. It absolutely does. But don't think for a second that because you want your drawings to be clearer that you should modify the approach in order to either try and hide your strokes by making them fainter or skip over lines that may be important but that you feel you can do without. You absolutely should not. The goal for all constructional drawing lessons is not to produce pretty drawings you can pin on your fridge or display at a gallery. Although constructional drawing does result in rather pleasing aesthetic in my opinion, that's an irrelevant side effect. These extra lines serve a purpose. They're there to help you continue to develop your understanding of 3D space and how to build up your constructions from the simple to the complex, and to help reinforce your own belief that you are creating solid three-dimensional objects, in a 3D world, not drawing lines on a page. Eventually, you will internalize this understanding. They're not training wheels that you'll need to take off at some point. They're simple exercises that will inherently improve your spatial reasoning as a whole. This is why it's important to continue drawing for the fun of it alongside your exercises. That is, drawing without the intention of growing and learning. It gives you the opportunity to see how your approaches and general understanding develops while applying it naturally to areas of your interest.